May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our salvation. Amen. This weekend, this morning, we are about halfway between Christmas and Easter. Christmas, December 25th, the birth of Christ. We understand that. We marvel in that great, true story of Jesus' birth. And then 6 weeks from now or so, Easter, we kind of understand that. If we don't know the details or how it happened, we know the story, we know the narrative, Jesus risen from the dead. It's the foundation of the Christian faith. So, Christmas on one hand, Easter on the other, and just about smack in the middle, Transfiguration. Transfiguration. What's up with that? There's a new phrase that's entered the Christian vocabulary, I think in the last maybe 5 years or so. I first heard it in a Bible study here at Emmanuel, maybe 3 weeks ago now. Maybe you've heard it before. Some people say that certain words are stained glass words. Those are words that are hardly, if everywhere, if any time, ever heard anywhere outside the church. The stained glass windows. They're words that we wouldn't say over dinner if we're out with friends. We wouldn't necessarily speak in our workplace. They're stained glass words. Transfiguration is one of those stained glass words, isn't it? It's unlikely that there's another context, there's another scenario in which we would use that word. Beyond that, there's nothing in this episode of Jesus' life that can connect with my life, and I suspect hardly can connect with your life either. Most of us have been to concerts. There's lights flashing, particularly on the singer or the singers. There's strobe lights flashing around. That's one thing. But I've never seen that kind of light come from inside someone and shine out like there's 2,000 LEDs just coming right out of him to everything around. I'd pay good tickets to see a show like that. I'm sure you would as well. It's a weird, weird scene. Have we ever seen somebody's body light up with that? Has anybody ever seen the holy presence of God, the holy cloud of God, the holy aura of God just kind of descending on them? I haven't, if you have. Has anybody heard an audible voice from God? I haven't. Maybe you have. So there's so few connections with our life and what happened here on Transfiguration Day. Now, to be fair, I suppose there are some experiences, life occasions, some scenarios when we're given a little bit of a glimpse of what is really pure and true glory, kind of miniature mountaintop experiences. I'm thinking maybe of a wedding on one hand and maybe a family gathering on the other. Most of you have been to weddings, you know how it goes. We arrive at a wedding and maybe we sit on the appropriate side if that's important and if we ask. And then, though the wedding is supposed to start on that Saturday afternoon, it's 4 o'clock and people are looking at their watches because that's when things are supposed to start, but weddings never start on time, do they? Hardly ever. Dad's sitting over here, again, 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. He's got a tie on. He never wears a tie, and he's grumbling inside, smiling outside, but grumbling inside. Yeah, why am I being tortured, right? Mom's over here. She's been scanning the crowd for the, not people, but the dresses that other women are wearing. And she sees a few, and she's thinking to herself, she's smiling, but she's thinking to herself, why can't I have a pretty dress like that sometime in my life? Is that too much to ask? And the kids are over here, they're elementary age, and they're fussing and they're squirming. They're just hoping that the ceremony is going to be over soon because the real fun starts right at the reception. They get so noisy that dad looks over at them with one of those looks. You've gotten those looks when you were a child. You are so in trouble. They've seen it before, right? They're maybe quiet for 10 seconds or 15. The groomsmen come in, as do the bridesmaids. And then the organist stops for 3, 4, 5 seconds and plays a measure of the processional hymn. And on cue, the people there for the wedding stand up and almost in unison turn around and look back to where the bride is, ready to come into the venue or into the church. And in that moment, some wonderful thing happens to that group of people there at the wedding. That woman standing there is a symbol of light with that dress and beaming smile. And when she smiles, we smile as well, right? It's a beautiful, wonderful moment. In a sense, we honor her and her husband to be with her. She is in her glory. And it's good. It's all good. That's a wedding. Let me give you an example from a family gathering. Think of a patriarch and a matriarch who have spent their life sacrificing for their children, making sure their children have a roof over their head and 3 squares and that they do well in school. They support their children, grade school, high school, maybe into the trades, maybe to college, wherever. These kids then go off and find their own way and make their own life, and they get married and they have children, and the grandparents are there to babysit the grandchildren and do whatever they can to help the children, the grandchildren, off to a good start. It's part of life. And then comes the family gathering at Thanksgiving time. Grandma and Grandpa are there, and the kids, and the grandkids. After dinner, the photographer shows up, and the children and the grandchildren, they kind of gather tight around Grandma and Grandpa. It's good. It's crazy good. For years later, those children and those grandchildren will drag out that picture, and they'll look at that picture and they'll say, weren't those days something? Wasn't that Thanksgiving Day something? There are Mom and Dad, Grandma and Grandpa, in all their glory, in all their glory. For a moment, there was shalom, the way things ought to be. A generation ago, we'd call that a Kodak moment. So special, so unique, so profound. Well, back to Transfiguration. I've heard it said that to understand Transfiguration, we need to understand that sometimes when we're reading the Bible, it's not on the same level. It's not the same kind of literature. It doesn't have the same kind of meaning. We have to understand what we're reading and hearing. Some parts of the Bible are like a manual. Others are like a window. The book of Proverbs is like a manual. All the way through, there's rich, rich advice. Proverbs 13, verse 20 says, become wise by walking with the wise. Hang out with fools and watch your life fall to pieces. That's a good principle. Today, we'd say the same thing a little bit differently. We'd say something like this. Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. Proverbs has a good principle. It's a life principle. The Bible has those principles in those 66 books kind of smeared through from beginning to end. But not all of the Bible is about principle. Our sacred texts are about so much more. Sometimes, and here's where Transfiguration comes in, sometimes when we read the Bible, we have not a principle, but a window. Transfiguration is a window because it just allows in something, it lets in something that we couldn't see if the window weren't there. And what Transfiguration shows us is a sneak preview of coming attractions. A sneak preview. Here they were up on the mountain, Peter, James, John, and Jesus. In the Bible, fantastic things happen on mountains. Moses, who appears here in the Transfiguration, had been on another mountain another day, Sinai. Can we say 10 Commandments, right? Elijah was on another mountain on another day, Horeb, and he had some words, and those words came to him from God, and God says, listen to the voice. Even today, people climb mountains for lots of reasons, but mostly to be awed, to be captured by the beauty of it all. Oftentimes, they are changed by the experience. More than 3 decades ago, my family and I lived very close to Boulder, Colorado, north of Denver. I served the church there, and I did some graduate work at the University of Colorado, Boulder. If the air was real clear, we could sit on our back porch and see in the distance Long's Peak, about 30 miles northwest of Denver, just outside Estes Park. Long's Peak is the northernmost of what are called the 14ers of the Rocky Mountain Range. That is, mountains that reach up 14,000 and more feet above sea level. Each year, something like 18,000 people attempt to climb Long's Peak. It's not a technical climb as technical climbs go, but it's also not a little stroll up a hill. The climbers leave the trailhead at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they walk and they zig and they zag and go over some bumps and so on. They walk 7.5 miles to the top of Long's Peak. And they stay there for half hour, 45 minutes, and then another 7.5 miles back down the mountain. 15 miles or so total. Takes about 12, 15 hours. Leave at 3 in the morning, get back 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. It's a task. But folks don't climb Long's Peak because of a principle. Not most of them, at least. They don't go there to study geology or the atmosphere. They climb Long's Peak for the views. Southern Wyoming to the north. The Front Range to the east. Behind them, the skyline of Boulder and finally Denver. And to the west, some of the glaciers of the Rocky Mountains. They take it in. They are in awe. You and I don't visit the Grand Canyon in Arizona or Denali in Alaska or hike in Door County, Wisconsin, or climb a mountain to have some principle to apply. We go there to be captured by the beauty, to be awed by what we see. Back again to Transfiguration. Peter was there, and James and John. By this time, they had known that Jesus was a great teacher, and he was. A healer, and he was. A prophet, because he had some wise thing to say about the future. A miracle worker, because they'd seen him do some of that. They were already then what we today call Jesus followers. But Peter wasn't so sure what he was seeing. Peter's long contact with Jesus over at least 3 years had dulled the newness, had eroded his sense of awe and wonder. He had spiritual cataracts that didn't allow him to see the real Jesus in all his glory. As Jesus followers, today, you and I can also develop those kind of spiritual cataracts so that we no longer can see all of Jesus for all who he is. When we read the Gospels, it's true that we can, in a sense, say that the disciples are us and we are the disciples. We are Peter and Peter is us. Maybe we've heard one part of the story. We maybe heard lots of part of the story. Maybe we've heard all of the story, but we've heard it so often that even our own senses can be dulled to just the wonder and the awe of the person we're dealing with. That's why we hear again Transfiguration. What is Transfiguration about? For most of his ministry, just about all of his ministry, Jesus conducted himself in kind of a low-key, behind-the-scenes, head-down kind of fashion. He often told his followers that they should not speak about what they had seen and experienced. He said that in our gospel lesson. He didn't want others to mess with the message. But there was one brilliant, over-the-top, amped up, megawatt, light and sound event in the life of Jesus, truly breathtaking. And that was the Mount of Transfiguration. And here again, he gave those disciples a sneak preview of coming attractions. For Peter, the first and foremost question was, how do you estimate Jesus? Not just what do you see there, or what have you heard, or what do you think about him? How do you estimate him? Who is this person? Not just some of this person, but who is this person? That's the question that challenged Peter, and it's the question that has challenged readers of the Gospels for now 2,000 years. The Transfiguration wants us to know, one more time this year, that this is more than a good man. He was. This is one who is more than a prophet like Elijah, and he was. This is someone who's more than the great Moses, the lawgiver, and he was. He is Messiah, Son of God, in all his glory, yet the one who died that we might live. Transfiguration is, in fact, a stained glass word. I'll give you that. But we look through those stained glasses at times to see something breathtaking and awe-inspiring. To help us, God does not send us a principle. He sends us a picture. A fitting close to this message is the following illustration. It's a metaphor. And like all metaphors, they finally fritter away, and we can't press the details too much. But this metaphor explains in a way, pictures in a way, the hope of resurrection in a fresh way, with transfiguration thrown in. This is a transfiguration fable. Come along. Picture in your mind a colony of grubs living at the bottom of a shallow swamp. Every once in a while, one of those grubs is inclined to climb a leaf stem to the surface of the water above. Then he disappears above the surface of the water, and he never returns. All the other grubs wonder below why this is so, and then they make a commitment among themselves. They talk among themselves, and they agree that the next one who goes up that stem, or one of those stems, will come back and tell the others. So one of those grubs feels this urge and climbs that leaf stem and goes out above the surface of the water and lands on a lily pad. And there, In the warmth of the sun, that little grub falls asleep. While he sleeps, the skeleton of that tiny creature breaks open, and out of the inside of that grub comes a magnificent dragonfly with beautiful rainbow-hued wings. Think Transfiguration. And he spreads those wings and flies high above the surface of the water. Then he remembers the commitment he has made to those behind. And yet now he knows he cannot return. They would not recognize him in the first place. And beyond that, he could never stay and live in that place again. But one thing is his that takes away all his distress. They too shall climb that stem, and they too will know that glory. In a few days, Lent begins for this year. Transfiguration leans into Lent. Jesus will suffer, we will too. Jesus will die, we will too. Jesus will be raised from the dead, we will too. Jesus will ascend to the Father in a human body, shining with glory, we will too. Happy Transfiguration Sunday. Amen and amen.